Social Security and Parental Leave. I'm Steve Ray, and this is Outside the Box. Welcome to Outside the Box. I'm your host, Steve Ray. The United States is one of only a few countries that does not require employers to provide paid parental leave to employees. And while politicians have wrestled with this issue for years, a brand new proposal has emerged to allow workers to pay for parental leave using their Social Security benefits. The idea has garnered support from a number of U.S. senators, but there is considerable resistance to the idea as well. Joining us via Skype to discuss the proposal is Kerry Lucas, president of the Independent Women's Forum. She is co-author of Liberty is No War on Women and author of The Politically Incorrect Guide to Women, Sex, and Feminism. She previously worked as senior domestic policy analyst for the House Republican Policy Committee and at the Cato Institute. She is a graduate of Princeton University and of Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. And joining us to critique the proposal is Benjamin Vegte, Vice President for Policy at the National Academy of Social Insurance. And I must interject, by the way, he is speaking today as an individual. The Academy does not take policy positions. His research, teaching, and policy work have been devoted to advancing our understanding of the role of social insurance in thriving economies and democratic societies. He earned his master's in public administration from Harvard's Kennedy School and his PhD in modern European history from the University of Chicago. Thank you both for joining us today. Good to see you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
So, Kerry, could you briefly explain to us this proposal to use Social Security to pay for parental leave?
Yeah, the thought behind it is that workers are all required already to pay into the Social Security program, and they're eligible for disability benefits after a very short work history. And the concept is basically to give workers the option to access some of their Social Security benefits after either giving birth or becoming a father or adopting a child, and then allowing them to take some of these Social Security benefits now, but in exchange to then require them to postpone their retirement benefits. So basically trying to trade off, allow them to take benefits when they need it most, in exchange for delaying retirement benefits. That's the basic concept of it.
All right, and we'll get deep into the details of it. I want to ask Dr. Vegte, what do you think of this idea overall?
Well, I think overall I welcome the proposal. I think it's important that we talk about the need to make it more affordable for people to have children. We have a tremendous problem in this country, a social policy problem, but it's also a problem for families that, for all of us, that it's very hard to have children in many areas of the country where it's very expensive to raise children. And so people aren't having children as often as they used to. In Washington, D.C., child care costs $500 a month, which is an inconceivable amount for many families. So I think it's important that we do something in this area. I have concerns about the specific proposal, but I welcome the discussion on the topic.
All right. Well, I want to lay out a cold, hard fact here for you. The Social Security is already in the red, apparently, spending more for retirement benefits than it takes in from payroll taxes each year. And pardon me. And just days before we taped this program, the Social Security Administration released a report that said Social Security will be insolvent by the year 2034 and Medicare by 2026. So, why not propose an alternative like a medical savings account with, say, deferred taxes so that those planning a family can pay in a similar fashion, and retirees, who are obviously long past the childbearing age, aren't burdened with supporting another social program. And Kerry, you want to start with answering that?
Sure. Well, I really like the idea of savings accounts. That's something that the Independent Women's Forum has written about. But when we talk about paid leave, what we're really talking about, our greatest concerns at least, are for those who have lower incomes. I think that most people in this who are concerned about paid leave recognize that, somebody who's making well above the national average, they can probably figure out how to save on their own and make provisions, even if they lack the paid leave benefits on their job. But for somebody who has lower wages and who lacks paid leave benefits, that's when there's the real concerns, because they often end up having to turn to other forms of public assistance or just facing tremendous financial hardship. And so savings accounts are much less likely to help those folks because they typically have less money to put aside. So I like the idea of savings accounts, but that's why at the Independent Women's Forum we are trying to find something else to target more support for those with lower incomes, but do it without growing government or creating a new entitlement or a new mandate.
So Ben, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think I agree with Kerry that low-income workers would have difficulty. I mean, they simply wouldn't take the leave or it had to be done through individual savings. Half the population hasn't saved anything for retirement. Many don't even have access to retirement accounts, much less been able to save for retirement. So people aren't saving for retirement. They're not going to have savings for this purpose. Most families don't even have money to meet a minor financial emergency. So individual savings isn't a solution for lower income workers. So I think that Kerry's right that social insurance is a good approach. I wanted to clarify one thing about Social Security. It's actually not paying out more than it takes in. By law, Social Security can't pay out more than it takes in. You have to think of it like any other defined benefit pension, like an IBM pension plan or any big company's pension plan. I know big companies don't have pension plans anymore, but some do. But it used to be in the 50s and 60s that most big corporations had them. And the way they funded them was to put money aside when people earned an entitlement, and they invested that, and then they paid the benefits out of the investment. And that's how Social Security works as well. So we have trust fund reserves of $2.8 trillion right now to pay benefits for the generation.
Well, let's go to that point then. For both of you, do employers have to match those contributions or have any further paperwork in implementing this idea, especially small businesses who are already fairly burdened with paperwork?
Well, you mean that this proposal, the idea of paid leave through Social Security, it wouldn't be it wouldn't affect the business really at all. This would be something that individuals, it's through Social Security itself, through SSA. So there would be some burden placed on SSA to administer this new benefit, but it'd be relatively modest compared to what the Social Security Administration is doing right now. But that is always something to consider. And I think I want to say kind of out front that there are trade-offs to any of these proposals when it comes to paid leave. There are certainly costs and people who wouldn't benefit as much from this Social Security program. But I think what we've been trying to focus on is trying to find something that threads the needle, because the good news is in America right now is a growing number of companies are providing more generous paid leave benefits, and the concern about doing something more generous through the government is that it would end up crowding out those private businesses from offering benefits. So that's why we're trying to find a way to help people who really need it, but then not disrupt the progress that we're making in the private sector and providing benefits on their own.
So I think it's important to have a social insurance approach because it's universal. The good thing about doing it through Social Security would be that you're covering everyone. In many states, for example, you were saying that private companies do that, and that's true, but often it's companies like Google or Apple that do that in ways. We're also concerned about janitorial. A lot of low-income workers, their job they have well. They're going to get those benefits through a social insurance program. Social Security is one approach, but I think a better approach would be just to enact paid leave program either on a national level or on the state level. There are 7 states that have enacted paid leave programs: Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, Hawaii, Washington State, Washington D.C. They're all successful programs, and surveys have been done, research has been done, and found that it doesn't negatively impact businesses at all. Jane Waldfogel at Columbia University has done research on that and found that businesses aren't impacted negatively at all. Most of these programs are funded by employee payroll taxes. Some states also have a matching contribution. But the point is, if you're going to provide a new benefit like paid family and medical leave, you would need to have a new revenue source to finance it, because otherwise, as you noted, Steve, you are going to be hurting Social Security's finances if you take them out of Social Security.
Now let me point up real quick that the Family and Medical Leave Act, the FMLA, which grants already 12 weeks of unpaid leave, just celebrated its 25th anniversary. That plan also happens to assist employees with seriously ill family members who would then be able to balance their work and life demands. I would ask, how does this maternity portion of the family leave proposal impact the medical leave portion of the FMLA, if it does at all?
The idea was to start modest and to see how it worked by starting with some of the gravest needs and almost the most clear-cut, administratively clear-cut, is to focus on families with new babies or new children in their family. So it wouldn't impact that, and that is a legitimate trade-off. But I think it's important to note that the problem, of course, is once you start allowing for medical illness or caring for loved ones, it becomes much more expensive. And the idea of creating a new payroll tax, which is really the alternative. It's funny. I think that again, you mentioned I was the president of an organization called the Independent Women's Forum. We're a small organization, about 20 women. And maternity leave comes up a lot. That's something as the person who's in charge of. I have 5 kids myself. I have 2 women who are currently on maternity leave, and as the person who has to make sure that our books balance, maternity leave matters a great deal to me. And when I assess ideas like this, when I hear about something like enacting a new payroll tax, well, if that were to happen, I can tell you how, as a small business owner, how I would respond. I would say, okay, fine, we're going to levy a new tax, so everybody's going to have less money in their pockets, and I would absolutely eliminate the paid leave program that we offer people now. People would then have a less generous, most of the government programs replace about 65% of wages. Currently, we do 6 weeks at 100% of wages, and then people have to take unpaid leave if they need to take off longer. So a lot of my employees would end up having a less generous maternity leave program or less generous time off, but I would absolutely cut it. When I think about this, was one of the things when I was thinking about the Social Security idea, I thought, well, you know what, I would, as a small business owner, I would continue to offer my employees the 6 weeks because that's a way to attract good women to work for me. It wouldn't disrupt that. I wouldn't want them to have to make the trade-off for later for retirement. But then if there was somebody who had a real problem, who had a complicated pregnancy, she could then turn to Social Security, and that would be her choice. But she'd be making a trade-off, and I think that's really important. Obviously, our entitlement programs cost a lot of money, and we see Social Security. There's really, when you think about it, our retirement age is quite young compared to the historical averages. So asking somebody or giving somebody the opportunity to receive some benefits today when they're young and poorer makes a lot of sense compared to saying everybody has to start receiving benefits at age 67 or 65 or 62. We let people move their retirement age on the back end. Why not give them a chance to have some now?
Well, let me address this to Ben then. Isn't this temporal discounting? Putting more value on having something now rather than having something better in the future by delaying Social Security benefits for 12 weeks or more at retirement age?
Yeah, and it's not good for people because they need that retirement benefits when they're older. There's evidence that more than 50%, precisely 50% of households are expected to have at least a 10% lower standard of living in retirement than they have during their working years, according to research done at Boston College. People need especially low-income workers are not able to save through the 401k and IRA system. They don't have defined benefit pensions, and all they have is their Social Security. The fundamental problem we have in our economy over the last 4 decades is the lack of wage growth for average workers, for the median worker and lower income workers. They don't partake in the growth of the economy as a whole the way they did in the 50s and 60s. And if you cut people's Social Security retirement benefits in order to give them paid leave while they're working, you're cutting their total lifetime compensation, their total lifetime income. And I think that's not a good solution for those women or men. I think that the solution is to bring a new revenue source in to fund those benefits, ideally matched by their employers. Let me just finish my thought. Ideally matched by their employers, so that benefits are paid for without cutting their retirement.
Carrie, go ahead and respond.
Sure. I'm very interested. I've been mentioning this idea of the lack of wage growth because, of course, taking 1% of people's payroll tax means that they're going to have less money in their pocket starting right now. And that means that their lifetime earnings are going to be lower. So I know as an employer, I'm in my 40s, if you told me I could either make the choice to work an extra 3 months at 65 versus paying a payroll tax of 1% for for the next 20 years of my working life, I would much more welcome the decision. And again, this is a voluntary program. This is not something that everyone would have to do. Where a tax is something that every single person would have to pay. And it's also important as an economic concept to recognize that when we talk about employers paying part of the tax and employees paying part of the tax, as an employer, I can tell you the way that compensation works is you take out you figure out how much somebody has to cost. That includes not just what their take-home pay. It depends. It's how much it costs me to employ them. So if I have to pay an extra 1% on top of the current taxes I'm paying, they're going to be paid less. This money has to come from somewhere.
Well, let's talk about.
I think it's important if we're worried about low-income people not being able to have wage growth, then for heaven's sakes, when putting another payroll tax on them, the most aggressive form of taxes, I think is a tremendous step backwards.
Well, let's talk about the overall impact on the workplace then. Do either of you believe that government-granted paid leave will only encourage companies to discriminate against young women, newlywed couples, and anyone else who seems likely to have a child in the next few years?
Actually, it won't, because it compared to the status quo, it'll be much better, because the cost of providing the paid leave would come from the society as a whole through the payroll tax. It's applied to everyone, rather than small businesses having to pay that cost exclusively out of their own income. So right now, small businesses, high road employers like Kerry's organization, have to pay all of that cost themselves, which makes it's a disincentive for them to hire young women. Whereas if it were collectively borne, if that burden were collectively borne by all workers and all businesses, then high road employers would not be punished vis-a-vis low road employers. It would remove the disincentive to hire young women.
Carrie, your answer?
No, I just want to the costs, like the hard costs, having somebody else pick that up would help. But really, the biggest cost when it comes to someone like me, and I hire a lot of women of childbearing age, is their absence. So and having people encouraged to take longer and longer leaves will definitely. And there's tons of research that shows this. It's interesting. We often talk about Europe and mention how well Europe does in offering family leave to people. But one thing that it's important to take a look at is there's trade-offs. There's wonderful things about. I lived in Europe for 7 years, and there's wonderful things about having the generous family packages that they have. But one of them is women are far less likely to be in professional positions. They're far less likely. Half as many females as men are managers in Europe, when it's almost parity in America.
I hate to cut you off, because I really enjoy the fact that you're giving very complete answers, both of you, but we are short on time, and I want yes or no's to a couple of these very quickly before we wrap things up.
Can I give a brief response?
I'm absolutely short on time, but I will give you a chance here on this. The briefest answer, please. Do you believe government-funded paid family leave would end the trend of companies voluntarily offering paid family leave to their employees, as companies wouldn't offer to pay for a benefit that the government is offering to fund? Yes or no from both of you, please.
Yes, although it depends on how you do it. Yes.
Ben?
It's not that simple.
Absolutely.
Only 14% of companies provide paid leave. 14%. So that's
totally misleading.
It barely exists today. So for low-income workers, there is no paid leave by corporation.
All right.
That's totally misleading.
And Kerry, since you've been with the Cato Institute, which is famously libertarian, for small government and so forth, both Marco Rubio and the President Trump, support similar ideas. Briefly, what are the political hurdles in getting this passed, if any?
There's tremendous political hurdles. Just the Democrats are unlikely to want to give the president anything that would be considered a win. But then there's also a lot on the right who are very concerned about the idea of expanding government into this. So, but there's also a lot of interest. I think that there's some in the middle who are very happy to kind of thread the needle and get support to people who need it without just growing government with a brand new Obamacare style entitlement program, one size fits all for paid leave, which is the alternative that's most often put out there. And I think America doesn't want to go in that direction.
Okay. Kerry, can you explain how your proposal would create a self-financing mechanism for paid parental leave, removing one of the biggest obstacles to federal legislation to establish a national paid leave program, essentially having new parents borrow against their own future retirement benefits? And what is it based on? Is it a European model?
No, we have a really smart woman who came up with this idea, who works with us and was just trying to find a way to help people who need it, but without the need for a new payroll tax on all workers. So yeah, you've got it. It's a kind of simple concept that this would basically being in the same way we give people the flexibility to decide if they want to retire at 62 or 67, with the recognition that gosh, we have these people often live for 30 years into retirement now. Giving them the option to work an extra 3 months in exchange for 12 weeks off or more is a choice we think they should be allowed to make. So the way to make it so that it doesn't impact the long-term finances is to require people who get a benefit today to pay it back in the future. And again, it would be entirely voluntary.
Ben, is this the proverbial third rail that nobody wants to go and touch until Social Security is fixed or at least modified?
Well, the Social Security is its own program that protects against, the risk for insufficient economic security in retirement, disability, or death of a breadwinner. It's an important program. It has its own financial challenges that need to be addressed. So I agree with you with the implication of the question, which is that you really don't want to reduce Social Security benefits that people can expect for other purposes, at least certainly not until Social Security's finances have been fully funded as well. But more broadly, I would make the point that because of wage stagnation, people don't have enough money for retirement already.
Yep.
Kerry made a good point that some people are living longer, but not everyone is living longer. Mortality is one of the findings of the recent trustees report is that mortality is actually increasing for low-income workers. People are dying, committing suicide, and the rate of suicide has gone up by 30% in the last 20 years, and deaths have gone up tremendously in the last 10, 30 years. A lot of people also have bad health and aren't able to work at 62, 63, 64. We all hope we'll be able to, but many people aren't able to, especially low-income workers. So it's really rolling the dice on people's retirement security if they take their Social Security benefits in part to pay for their paid leave. And I would say, if you think of that, then if you did this with Social Security, you would also want to do it for your 401k and IRA, right? If people should be able to use those funds for their paid leave as well. So if you really believe in this concept, why not just say, let people use 401k and IRA to fund their paid leave? And I think the reason we wouldn't want to do that is because people need that money in retirement.
Let me ask this of both of you. Since we are really now in more of a gig economy where you're not working 20 years for the same company, here's your gold watch and go home, with this gig economy, should Social Security be more means tested so that if you're earning at this level, you don't collect Social Security if you're well above that? Would that help?
Go ahead, Kerry.
That would certainly help in terms of Social Security's finances, but there would be a lot of people who've been thinking, gosh, I've been paying a tremendous amount of money into Social Security with the idea that I'd be getting something back down the road. But again, I think the question is not, obviously there is a trade-off, and asking people to work 3 months longer, that means they're going to be getting less at retirement. The question is do you think that who should decide when you get those benefits? Does the federal government get to say, no, you absolutely, only time you can get this is once you're 67? And we do use Social Security for disability. And one good thing about using paid leave, and I'm sure Ben would agree for this, one of the reasons for paid leave is that it helps people stay in the workforce. It encourages women who have paid leave are more likely to return to the workforce, and it could end up having higher retirement income because they don't end up quitting their jobs for 2 years. So even from a Social Security standpoint, it could be that because women's earnings will be higher, their work history will be longer, that it actually leads to increased retirement benefits at the end, even with that trade-off. That's something that's hard to model, but it's certainly a possibility.
We're going to take 2 viewer questions. First from Raymond McDonald. Isn't Social Security owed money by other federal agencies? Shouldn't we fix that problem first? And how do we do it?
No, Social Security is not. It's completely self-funded. Its finances don't interact with the finances of the rest of the government. Social Security takes in payroll tax revenues. When it has a surplus, it invests that money in Treasury bonds. It has reserves of $3 trillion. It does not owe money to the rest of the government. It pays its benefits out of its own revenue. That's not.
And Kerry, this is for you from Ann Patterson. She says, I thought conservatives wanted to get rid of Social Security. Now they want to expand it.
But this wouldn't be expanding it. This is making it more efficient. And conservatives don't want to get rid of Social Security. We want to make sure that it's financially stable. And I think doing things like considering raising the retirement age, finding other ways to balance the books and to not make it a burden on younger workers is important. But this is just a step to make government more efficient, not larger.
All
more
right.
Flexible.
All right, that sounds good. Now it is time for What's Your Solution, where we ask the critic for his own solution to this problem. Last word is yours. Go ahead, Dr. Vengti.
Sure, thank you, Steve. I would say that we don't need to look to Europe for a solution to this problem. We have Rhode Island, New Jersey, New York, and California already have solutions that work really well. They have paid family and medical leave programs that provide not only leave for parents when they want to take care of a child, but also for sick family members like parents, perhaps dementia, for example. That was the case in my family, and that's a very valuable program. It works well in those states. Surveys show it doesn't harm businesses, and it takes the pressure off of small businesses from having to provide those benefits on their own. So that would be my solution.
I think it's important to remember that when we offer more benefits, there often are consequences, unintended consequences, like making women less attractive employees. And we have seen, while there's a lot of, I agree that there's some good news coming out of some of the state programs, there is also research that shows that unemployed women have had a harder time getting jobs, which is also something that we see. There are employment effects, because even if they are gender neutral, which of course they would be, women are more likely to take these benefits, and that often impacts women's economic opportunities, which is why I think we need to try to continue with making things more flexible and not have a one-size-fits-all solution from government.
Well, this sounds like it's something that affects everybody across the political spectrum, across the financial spectrum as well, and it's something we could have gone on about for at least a good hour or so. Thank you both. I appreciate the time. That is all the time we have, and we'd like to thank Kerry Lucas of the Independent Women's Forum and Dr. Benjamin Vengti of the National Academy for Social Insurance for joining us to discuss this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Outside the Box. I'm Steve Ray. We'll see you next time.